In the quiet town of Hillview mornings, unfurled like gentle whispers, soft sunlight pouring through windows, birds singing their familiar tunes, and the comforting rhythm of everyday life. James J. Wilson, a 58-year-old retired military veteran, rose early that day, as he always did, stepping barefoot onto the cool wooden floor of his modest home. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint aroma of blooming jasmine from the garden he so lovingly tended. Jay's hands, calloused from years of service and soil, carefully pruned the rose bushes outside each snip, a meditative act connecting him to the earth and to memories of a life spent defending his country. Nearby, his wife Angela slept peacefully, her soft breathing a gentle counterpoint to the world waking around them. Their children's laughter echoed faintly from the neighborhood playground, a sound that wove warmth and hope into the fabric of their family. This was the world Jay cherished, one of peace, simple joys, and the quiet dignity of hard work. He often reflected on the stark contrast between the serenity of his present and the chaos of his past battles overseas. The war had left scars, some seen, others buried deep within. But here in Hillview, he sought healing and normalcy. Yet beneath this calm surface, a fragile tension lingered. Jay knew that peace was never guaranteed, especially for men and women like him. Black veterans, who carried both the honor of service and the burden of inequality. On that particular morning, the sun cast long shadows across the porch as Jay sipped his coffee, savoring a rare moment of stillness. He glanced at the family photos lining the mantel, smiling faces frozen in time, reminders of love and resilience. The air was thick with unspoken gratitude, a testament to battles won and lives rebuilt. But fate, as it often does, chose that tranquil morning to shatter the silence. Without warning, the distant rumble of engines and shouting voices pierced the calm. Jay's senses sharpened instantly, years of training surfacing with clarity. From the corner of his eye, he saw the flashing lights of unmarked vehicles speeding toward his home. A swarm of heavily armed officers pouring out their movements, precise yet aggressive. Angela stirred awake, confusion flickering across her face as the front door burst open. Jay's heart pounded not from fear alone, but from the instinct to protect the life he had fought so hard to build. His voice, steady but urgent, called out, "Angela, stay calm. I'm here." The officers stormed in their commands, harsh and unyielding. Jay's mind raced, trying to piece together the reason for this sudden intrusion. Then came the moment that would change everything. In the living room, Angela, bewildered and unarmed, was forcibly restrained. Jay watched in horror as one officer deployed a taser against her, the electric shock sending her body convulsing against the cold floor. The sound of the device buzzing seemed to echo in Jay's ears, mingling with his own silent cries. Time slowed. The warmth of the morning vanished, replaced by a suffocating chill of disbelief and rage. Jay's military discipline urged him to stay composed, but beneath the surface emotions churned a storm of helplessness, anger, and the desperate need to intervene. Nearby, a young neighbor, Alex, stood frozen but determined. With trembling hands, he raised his phone, capturing every moment an unblinking witness to a moment no one should endure alone. Jay's voice broke the silence, calm yet commanding. "This isn't right." His words, weighted with authority and pain, hung in the air, challenging the officers to reconsider. But the situation spiraled, the room charged with tension. Jay's instincts told him this was more than a routine operation. It was a collision of power, prejudice, and misunderstanding. As the chaos unfolded, Jay's thoughts flickered to the lessons of his past. the importance of courage in the face of injustice, the unyielding strength required to stand for those you love, the necessity of fighting not just on distant battlefields, but in your own backyard. This was no longer just a personal crisis. It was a reflection of a deeper societal fracture. In the heart of Hillview, on a morning that began with promise, the Wilson family's world would be forever altered. Their story, one of resilience, pain, and unbreakable spirit, was about to unfold, carrying with it a message that would resonate far beyond their quiet neighborhood. And so, their journey began. Before we get started with today's story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're tuning in from and what team it is. We'd love to know how far this story has traveled and who it's touching along the way. All right, let's jump right in. The morning at the Wilson household began like any other sunlight, filtering gently through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the kitchen, where the family gathered for breakfast. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sweet scent of pancakes sizzling on the griddle. Angela, radiant and full of life, despite the early hour, smiled as she poured syrup over the stack, while their two children laughed and chatted animatedly, their voices weaving a symphony of innocence and joy. James stood nearby, wiping soil from his hands, having just finished tending to the vegetable garden in the backyard. Gardening was more than a hobby. It was his sanctuary, a way to nurture life after years of facing death on distant battlefields. His rugged hands, once steady on a rifle, now carefully pruned tomato plants and watered rows of green beans, each leaf a testament to patience and hope. "Mom, can I help with the garden later?" His youngest asked, eyes bright with curiosity. Angela nodded warmly. "Of course, sweetheart. It's a family project now." The kitchen table, cluttered with dishes and crumbs, was the center of a household filled with love and laughter. James exchanged a glance with Angela, a silent conversation of gratitude passing between them. Their life was simple, but it was theirs, a fragile piece carved out from years of struggle. Outside, the birds sang their morning songs, unaware of the storm gathering just beyond the horizon. As the family savored their meal, the normalcy of the moment was both comforting and deceptive. It was a fragile bubble poised to burst. The neighborhood around them was peaceful, a small town where everyone knew each other by name. But beneath the surface tension simmered racial divides, systemic injustices, and a history of mistrust between the community and law enforcement. James was acutely aware of this. He had witnessed the scars these tensions left on families, on friendships, on the fabric of society itself. Yet here in his home, he tried to shield his loved ones from the harsh realities beyond their doorstep. Little did they know, the very walls that protected their laughter would soon witness a moment of brutal upheaval. Later that day, as James prepared to water the garden once more, the quiet was shattered by the distant roar of engines and the flashing lights of unmarked police vehicles barreling down the street. Their arrival was abrupt, violent, even an invasion that offered no warning, no explanation. Angela stood frozen in the doorway, confusion etched across her face. The children clung to each other, their laughter replaced by frightened whispers. James's heart raced, adrenaline surging as memories of combat reflexes took over. He moved toward the front yard, hands raised not in surrender, but in a plea for reason. "Wait, what's going on?" he called out. He is steady, despite the storm of emotions inside. But his words were drowned out by the commanding shouts of officers issuing orders, moving with military precision. The house, once a haven, became a battleground. Angela was grabbed roughly. resistance met with taser shocks that sent her crashing to the ground. James's world fractured in an instant. The children's cries filled the air, mingling with the harsh buzz of the taser. Time seemed to stretch the nightmare, unfolding in agonizing slow motion. Neighbors peered from behind curtains, some horrified, others frozen in disbelief. Alex, the boy next door, instinctively raised his phone, capturing the scene, a silent witness to the injustice that was unfolding in plain sight. James stood rooted, torn between rage and helplessness, his mind racing through every possible action. This was no longer just a family crisis. It was a stark reminder of the precarious line between safety and danger, between justice and abuse. The Wilsons' peaceful morning had been irrevocably shattered, their lives forever changed by a moment born of power misused and humanity ignored. Yet within that darkness, the seeds of resistance were being planted. The story of this day would not be forgotten. It would ignite a fire for justice that could not be silenced. The sun was climbing higher, casting sharp shadows across the Wilson property, when the silence was shattered by the abrupt screech of tires. Without warning, several unmarked vehicles tore down the quiet street, their sirens wailing faintly but insistently. James felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. This was no ordinary visit. Before he could process what was happening, a group of heavily armed officers in tactical gear stormed toward his home. Their movements were swift and coordinated, betraying military precision. James, a veteran himself, immediately recognized the signs of a planned raid. Yet nothing could prepare him for the chaos about to unfold. Police opened the door, a voice barked. Angela, startled and confused, stepped to the front door, trying to understand the commotion. Her heart pounded in her chest. Their children, sensing danger, huddled in the corner, eyes wide with fear. James called out, his voice steady but firm. "What's going on? Please tell me." But the officers weren't interested in answers. They pushed their way inside with force. In an instant, Angela was grabbed roughly. She cried out as an officer pulled out a taser, aiming it directly at her. The crackling buzz of the device filled the air as the electricity surged through her body, sending her collapsing to the floor. James's breath caught in his throat. Time slowed. His training screamed at him to act, but shock and disbelief pinned him down. "Stop! She's my wife." "You don't have to do this," he yelled. One officer turned to James, his expression cold and unyielding. "Stay back, sir. This is a police matter." But to James, it felt like a personal violation, an assault on the very sanctuary he had built with sweat and sacrifice. The violent scene unfolded before his eyes, each moment etching deeper wounds into his soul. Angela struggled against the officers, the shock waves of the taser leaving her trembling and disoriented. Tears streamed down her face, not just from pain, but from the betrayal of trust. How had they come to this, Al? Had protection turned into aggression? Meanwhile, James's mind raced. Was this a mistake? Was someone pulling strings behind the scenes? The reasons didn't matter in that moment. What mattered was the injustice happening to the woman he loved. From the corner of his eye, James noticed young Alex, the neighbor boy, raising his phone. The device's lens silently recorded everything, a powerful witness to the unfolding nightmare. "Get off her," James demanded, stepping forward despite the warning shouts. The officers moved to restrain him, but he was no ordinary man to be subdued easily. His years in combat had honed his instincts and resolve. "You're making a mistake," he said, voice low but firm. "We're not going down without a fight." The room crackled with tension, a collision between raw authority and determined defiance. Neighbors peered cautiously from behind curtains, whispers of alarm spreading through the street. This was no longer just a police raid. It was a stark display of power and its potential for abuse. The impact rippled through the Wilson family and the community alike. What had begun as a peaceful morning had morphed into a battlefield, a harsh reminder that those sworn to serve and protect can sometimes become agents of fear. As Angela was handcuffed and led away, James vowed silently that this would not be the end. He would fight for her, for their family, and for the truth. The lesson was clear and devastating. Unchecked power could shatter lives in an instant, and the fight to hold that power accountable was more urgent than ever. Amid the chaos that engulfed the Wilson household, a quiet yet powerful force was at work, Alex, a 14-year-old boy who lived just next door. From the moment the police burst onto the scene, Alex stood rooted to the spot, his heart pounding with fear and confusion. But instinctively, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. In that fraught moment, Alex knew that the world needed to see what was happening, not through the filtered lens of official statements or media spin, but raw and unedited. His hands trembled as he pointed the camera toward the unfolding scene, capturing every painful second, the sudden intrusion. Angela's collapse, James's desperate pleas, the cold indifference etched on the faces of the officers. With every press of the record button, Alex felt a surge of purpose. He was no longer just a boy witnessing injustice. He was a guardian of truth, a beacon shining light into the dark corners where abuses tried to hide. The weight of responsibility settled on his young shoulders, but he refused to look away. As the video recorded Angela being tased, neighbors gathered their faces masked with shock and disbelief. Some whispered prayers, others simply stood in stunned silence. Alex's footage quickly became a lifeline, an undeniable piece of evidence that would soon ripple far beyond their quiet street. Back inside, James caught sight of Alex through the window. A surge of gratitude swelled within him. "Thank you," he thought silently. In that moment, technology, something so familiar and everyday, transformed into a weapon of justice. The power of a single video clip can be staggering. It bypasses bureaucracy, cuts through lies, and forces the world to confront uncomfortable truths. For generations, abuses of power thrived in shadows, hidden from the public eye. But in the age of smartphones and instant sharing, those shadows shrink with every recorded moment. Alex's recording did more than document. It galvanized. It sparked conversations in living rooms, fueled debates in newsrooms, and ignited movements on social media. People who had never met the Wilsons before now saw their pain and felt compelled to act. Yet the journey from viral video to real change is rarely straightforward. The raw footage was met with denials and justifications, from some officials' attempts to discredit the witnesses and waves of misinformation. Still, the undeniable truth in Alex's video stood firm, a digital testament to injustice. For Alex, the experience was both awakening and burden. He grappled with the enormity of what he had recorded and the realization that his actions had thrust him into a much larger battle, a fight for fairness, dignity, and accountability. The lesson was clear in today's world. Technology is not just a tool of convenience. It is a catalyst for justice, a protector of the vulnerable, and a reminder that every individual, no matter how young or small, can make a profound impact. Through Alex's eyes and lens, a family's tragedy became a call to action, an urgent plea for change echoing across communities and generations. And so while the officers wielded batons and tasers, it was a young boy's phone that held the true power. the power to expose, to demand justice, and to inspire hope. As the tension in this room reached a boiling point, James felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him like never before. The air was thick with hostility officers standing rigid with their weapons trained ready to escalate at any provocation. The flashing lights cast eerie shadows across the walls, turning his home, a place of warmth and memories, into a fortress under siege. But James knew that panic would only feed the fire. Drawing from years of disciplined training and a deep well of courage, he steadied his breath and spoke 5 words that would shift the entire atmosphere. "Call the Omega file." Those words landed like a thunderclap. Instantly, the room fell silent. Eyes widened. The officers froze mid-motion, their aggressive postures softening into wary hesitation. The commanding officer lowered his weapon slightly, glancing sharply at his comrades, as if questioning what he had just heard. James watched the change ripple through the team. The swagger of authority was replaced by uncertainty. The weight of unspoken knowledge hung heavy in the air. "Did you say Omega file?" The lead officer finally asked, his voice a mix of suspicion and apprehension. James nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Yes. It's classified evidence that directly impacts this operation. If you want to continue, you'll need clearance. And trust me, this isn't just another raid." The words Omega file weren't just jargon. They were a key that unlocked a secret long buried beneath layers of silence and conspiracy. James knew that the mention of this file, whispered about in hushed tones among military veterans and insiders, carried immense power. It symbolized undeniable proof that could expose corruption, abuse, and covert operations that had left scars far deeper than any visible wound. The officers exchanged tense looks. The mood shifted palpably from confrontation to caution. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing the gravity of the situation. For a brief moment, James stood, not as a civilian, but as a guardian of truth, commanding respect through knowledge and calm resolve. "All right," the officer said, signaling his team to lower their weapons. "We're calling this off for now. But this isn't over." James's heart pounded, but his voice remained steady as he replied, "It never is." Outside, the flashing lights dimmed, and the officers retreated. Their heavy boots fading into the distance, the neighborhood breathed again. But James knew the real battle was just beginning. This pivotal moment illustrated a powerful truth. Courage combined with knowledge can tip the scales. It's not just about strength or numbers. It's about wielding the right information at the right time, standing firm even when the odds seem insurmountable. And for James, these 5 words were more than a command. They were a declaration of resilience and hope, a testament to the unyielding fight for justice that lay ahead. The name Omega file was whispered in hushed tones, carrying with it a weight that few dared to acknowledge openly. To outsiders, it was just a phrase, perhaps some cryptic military code. But to James, and to those who understood its significance, it represented a hidden truth, buried deep beneath layers of secrecy and lies. The Omega file was more than just a document. It was a meticulously compiled dossier containing classified evidence of covert experiments, unethical human testing, and war crimes committed under the veil of national security. This file exposed the darkest chapters of history activities that governments had tried to erase from memory experiments on unsuspecting victims, chemical trials in foreign lands, and violations of international law. James had encountered fragments of this truth during his years in service, snippets shared in confidential briefings or hinted at in the guarded conversations of veterans. But holding the knowledge of the Omega file was like holding a ticking time bomb. It came with danger, responsibility, and a heavy burden. Similar files had rocked the world before. The revelations of the Tuskegee syphilis experiments, the MK Ultra mind control programs, and other secret government operations had shown how far some would go to maintain power and control, often at the expense of human rights and dignity. Yet despite attempts to suppress these truths, history had proven that light eventually finds a way to pierce the darkness. The truth, no matter how deeply hidden, has a relentless power to liberate, to expose injustice, and to demand accountability. For James, invoking the Omega file was a declaration, a signal that he was not merely resisting a police raid, but standing against a system willing to silence those who dared to unveil uncomfortable realities. As the officers withdrew, whispers of the Omega file lingered in the air like a shadow, a silent warning that the story was far from over. Back inside, James sat down heavily, the weight of what he had just confronted settling upon him. His mind raced not with fear, but with determination. The Omega file was his shield and his sword, a weapon in the fight against oppression. He knew the stakes were high. Those who guarded the secrets of the Omega file wielded immense power. Challenging them meant risking everything: his freedom, his safety, and that of his loved ones. But James was no stranger to risk. His life had been forged in the crucible of conflict, and his resolve was unshakable. The Wilson family's ordeal was a microcosm of a much larger battle, a fight for truth in a world often clouded by deception. And as the first rays of dawn broke over Hillview, James made a silent vow to bring the Omega file into the light, to expose the hidden atrocities, and to ensure that justice, no matter how delayed, would prevail. Because in the end, the truth is the most powerful force of all one that can break chains, heal wounds, and change the course of history. As news of the shocking incident at the Wilson home began to spread, the once quiet neighborhood of Hillview transformed into a buzzing hive of concern and action. Neighbors who had previously exchanged polite greetings now gathered in small groups, their conversations heavy with disbelief and anger. The tight-knit community felt the weight of what had happened, not just as an isolated event, but as a symbol of the systemic issues that had long been ignored. Mrs. Wilson, a kindly elderly woman who had lived down the street for over 3 decades, was among the first to take a stand. Known for her gentle spirit and unwavering sense of justice, she was deeply shaken by the images circulating online. She sat on her porch, phone in hand, watching the video footage captured by young Alex and others unfold across social media platforms. Her voice trembled with a mix of sorrow and determination as she spoke to her neighbors. "We can't let this be forgotten. We have to stand together, share the truth, and demand accountability." Across town, more and more residents joined in, recording their own accounts, capturing not only the incident itself, but also the growing movement of solidarity. Videos, pictures, and heartfelt messages spread like wildfire, flooding timelines and news feeds with undeniable evidence of what had transpired. Hashtags began trending. #Justice for Angela. Stand with Wilson. Stop police abuse, uniting people from diverse backgrounds in a collective call for change. The power of this coordinated community response was profound. It transcended age, race, and social status, reminding everyone that the fight against injustice was not the burden of one family alone, but a shared responsibility. Local activists organized peaceful vigils and town hall meetings, providing a platform for voices that had too long been silenced. Social media became a double-edged sword, while it amplified the message of truth and solidarity. It also exposed the community to scrutiny and backlash. Yet the residents of Hillview remained resolute their unity, a beacon of hope amid adversity. James watched these developments with cautious optimism. The collective action born from pain and outrage was exactly what was needed to challenge the entrenched systems that allowed such abuses to occur. The footage recorded by Alex and countless others had transformed individual suffering into a powerful movement for justice. This unfolding story illustrated a vital lesson: transparency and communal effort are indispensable weapons against oppression. When voices rise together, when images cannot be ignored, the walls of silence and denial begin to crumble. For the Wilson family and their neighbors, the fight was no longer just about one incident. It was a fight for the soul of their community and the promise of a more just future. The sterile white walls of the hospital corridor seemed colder than ever as James paced anxiously outside the emergency room. Inside, Angela lay unconscious, her body battered, but her spirit unbroken. The violent encounter at their home had left her with injuries both visible and unseen. And now James faced an unexpected battle: the struggle to obtain clear information and proper care for his wife. He approached the hospital staff with the steady determination forged from years of military service. "I'm her husband," he said firmly. "I need to know what's happening. What's her condition? What treatments are being administered?" A nurse glanced at him, her expression guarded. "Sir, patient information is confidential. You'll have to wait until the doctors are available." Minutes stretched into hours. Calls went unanswered. James felt the walls closing in, not just physically, but emotionally, suffocated by a system that seemed more interested in bureaucracy than in compassion. Frustration gnawed at him. The hospital's reluctance to share information felt like another form of control, another barrier erected between Angela and the support she desperately needed. James knew all too well that transparency was more than a courtesy. It was a fundamental right, especially in moments of crisis. In a rare moment of candor, a junior doctor pulled James aside. "I understand your concern," she whispered, "but there's pressure from higher-ups. This case is complicated. Sensitive." James's jaw tightened. Sensitive because of what? 'Cause of who? The unspoken truth loomed. Angela's injuries were not just medical. They were a symptom of a larger injustice, a reminder of how systems can sometimes protect those in power rather than those in need, determined not to be sidelined. James began reaching out, contacting patient advocates, legal advisors, and community activists. He demanded access to medical records, clear updates, and most importantly, respect for Angela's dignity and rights. The hospital's stonewalling ignited public outrage. Community leaders and civil rights organizations joined the fight, calling for accountability and transparency. The media picked up the story, shining a spotlight on the opaque policies that allowed families like the Wilsons to be left in the dark. Through it all, James remained a pillar of strength. His nights were restless, filled with prayers and plans, but his resolve never wavered. For Angela, for their family, and for all who had suffered in silence, he vowed to break down every wall of secrecy. This painful chapter revealed a crucial lesson: the right to know, to understand, and to participate in medical decisions is as vital as the care itself. Without openness and honesty, healing becomes an impossible journey. The Wilsons' struggle at the hospital was not just about one woman's recovery. It was a call to reform, a system too often clouded by silence and suspicion. And so, amidst beeping monitors and hushed conversations, A new battle was underway. A battle for truth, dignity, and justice within the very walls meant to protect and heal. The night settled over Hillview with an unsettling quiet. But for James, there was no rest to be found. His mind raced, tangled in the web of events that had unfolded that day. Angela's injuries, the intrusive raid, and the mounting barriers they faced. As he sat in the dim light of his living room, a sudden vibration on his phone shattered the fragile calm. A terse message blinked on the screen. "Check the back fence. They're watching." James's heart skipped a beat. The warning was clear and chilling. Someone somewhere knew enough about his family's struggle to send a direct threat. The invisible eyes that had always lurked in the shadows were now unmistakably focused on him. He leaned back, steadying his breath. Panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. Not now, not ever. Years in combat had taught him the importance of calm, under pressure of turning fear into focus. He replayed the message in his mind, dissecting its meaning. Was it a warning to back off? A signal that his efforts to expose the truth were making waves? Or a threat meant to intimidate and silence? None of it mattered if he let fear rule him. Pulling his jacket tighter, James stepped outside the cool night air, sharp against his skin. His gaze swept the perimeter of his property, noting the familiar shapes of trees and fences that had once seemed so secure. Now every shadow seemed to conceal a watcher. He called out softly, "If anyone's out here, you know I'm not afraid. Come on, show yourself." His voice was steady, resolute, echoing into the stillness. Inside, Angela rested unaware of the unseen threats looming beyond the walls. But James knew he had to protect not only her, but the fragile hope their family held on to. He began mapping out a plan, steps to increase security allies, to call upon contingencies to prepare. Every resource, every contact, every ounce of knowledge mattered now. Throughout the night, James remained vigilant, a sentinel guarding against the unseen dangers that sought to suffocate their fight for justice. This moment underscored a harsh truth. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the determination to act despite it. In a world rife with threats and uncertainty, staying alert, recognizing danger, and preparing to respond are essential tools for survival. For James, the warning was a stark reminder that the path toward truth and justice is often shadowed by intimidation, but also that the human spirit, when anchored in love and conviction, can withstand even the darkest nights. The morning sun cast long shadows across the driveway as James stood face to face with the SWAT team. Once again, a tense standoff that seemed ripped straight from a nightmare he never imagined would unfold in his own backyard. The air was thick with anticipation every second, stretching into eternity as both sides measured each other, waiting for the first move. The leader of the SWAT unit, a grizzled officer with cold eyes and a voice sharp as steel, stepped forward. "Mr. Wilson, you need to come with us. This is a matter of law enforcement." James's gaze remained unwavering. "I'm not going anywhere until you explain why you invaded my home and tased my wife." A murmur rippled through the officers behind him. The tension was palpable authority clashing against defiance, muscle against resolve. "You're obstructing an ongoing investigation," the officer said. His tone laced with warning. "Step aside." James took a measured breath. "Obstruction. I'm protecting my family from injustice. You're the ones who crossed the line." The room seemed to hold its breath. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, cracks appeared in their unified front. One young officer lowered his weapon slightly, eyes flickering with doubt. Another shifted uncomfortably, sensing that this confrontation was not black and white. James seized the moment. "Listen, I'm not your enemy. I served my country, upheld the law in the toughest conditions. What you're doing here is wrong." His voice was steady, authoritative, not just a plea but a command, rooted in experience and truth. The SWAT leader hesitated, weighing the weight of James's words against the orders he'd been given. Finally, he nodded curtly. "We're calling this off for now." Relief washed over James, but he remained vigilant. "This isn't over. I expect accountability." As the team retreated, the neighborhood exhaled with him. The confrontation had been more than a physical standoff. It was a battle of wills, a testament to courage in the face of overwhelming power. This clash illuminated a timeless lesson. Standing up to unjust authority requires more than strength. It demands courage, conviction, and an unwavering commitment to justice. James's defiance was a beacon reminding everyone that no matter how formidable the opposition, one person's bravery can challenge the mightiest forces. In that moment under the rising sun, the Wilson family's fight for truth and dignity gained new momentum, an inspiring chapter in a story far from finished. Angela lay quietly in the sterile hospital room, the harsh white lights casting a pale glow on her weary face. The physical toll of the brutal encounter was evident. Bruises blossomed across her arms. Welts marked her skin, and a concussion left her moments of confusion and memory lapses. Yet beyond the visible injuries, the scars that would challenge her most were the ones hidden deep within. The doctors meticulously documented each wound. A fractured rib required careful monitoring. Her muscles were strained and tender from the sudden and violent taser shock. Her heart, though physically intact, bore the invisible weight of trauma. But even as the medical team tended to her body, the psychological wounds demanded attention. Angela's once lively spirit was now clouded by anxiety and fear. Simple noises like a door slamming or a raised voice triggered sharp pangs of panic. Nightmares haunted her sleep, replaying the terrifying moments in endless loops. She recoiled from the sight of uniforms and badges associations, forever altered by her ordeal. James watched helplessly as Angela struggled. He remembered the countless conversations with military counselors about post-traumatic stress, the invisible battle many veterans and their families face long after the guns fall silent. But seeing it up close, watching his wife's laughter fade into silence, struck a deep and raw chord in his heart. Angela's therapy sessions began with hesitation. The stigma surrounding mental health, especially in communities where strength is often equated with silence, made her reluctant. Yet with gentle encouragement and unwavering support from James, she took the first steps toward healing. Together they navigated a landscape of emotional upheaval. Support groups, counseling, mindfulness practices, and the slow rebuilding of trust. Each breakthrough was hard-won, a testament to resilience and hope. Their journey highlighted a vital lesson. The aftermath of violence extends far beyond physical injuries. Healing must encompass the mind and spirit as well. Recognizing the signs of trauma, seeking help, and fostering an environment of understanding are crucial to recovery. Angela's story became a powerful reminder that while bodies can mend, souls require care and compassion to reclaim peace. In the quiet moments between treatments and therapy, James and Angela found strength in each other, a bond fortified by adversity, and the shared belief that no darkness is so profound that it cannot be overcome. Their battle was not just for justice, but for the restoration of wholeness, physical, emotional, and spiritual. Through their pain and perseverance, they shed light on the silent wounds of violence, urging others to acknowledge, address, and heal from trauma with courage and kindness. The sterile walls of the hospital and the cold corridors of local government offices quickly revealed a harsh truth to James, a truth that weighed as heavily as Angela's injuries. Despite the clear physical and emotional trauma his wife endured, the institutions meant to protect and heal were closing ranks shrouded in silence and evasion. When James first requested Angela's medical records, his voice steady but insistent, he was met with bureaucratic barriers. Patient confidentiality hospital administrators repeated like a mantra, yet the answers felt hollow, a shield to obscure the truth rather than protect it. "Sir, the hospital can only release information to the patient or authorized representatives." A nurse explained, her tone polite but firm. "I am her husband." James countered, frustration creeping into his voice. "I have every right to know what happened to her." Yet the requests for transparency were met with delays, misplaced documents, and vague reassurances. It was as if the hospital preferred to keep its records locked away to avoid the scrutiny that might come with full disclosure. The frustration mounted. James's calls to city officials and the police department brought little relief. His inquiries were deflected, investigations stalled. The officials employed a familiar dance of denial and obfuscation. At one meeting, a government spokesperson offered a rehearsed statement about ongoing investigations and due process, but beneath the polished words was an unmistakable reluctance to hold anyone accountable. James's patience wore thin, replaced by a simmering resolve. He realized he was not just fighting for Angela's health, but for the very principles of justice and accountability. Behind closed doors, conversations hinted at more profound institutional fears, concerns that revealing the truth might expose systemic failures, misconduct, or worse, implicate those in positions of power. James reflected bitterly. The system is designed to protect itself, not the people. He found allies in unexpected places, whistleblowers within the hospital, advocates in civil rights groups, and journalists hungry for the truth. Together, they began to peel back the layers of secrecy. This chapter of their struggle exposed a grim reality, legal and ethical barriers, often intertwined to shield institutions from responsibility. The balance between privacy and transparency is delicate, but too often the scales tip in favor of silence. James's battle became a beacon, highlighting the urgent need for reforms, greater oversight, clearer protocols for victim support, and a culture shift toward openness and empathy. The fight against these invisible walls was daunting, but surrender was not an option. In confronting institutional silence, James learned that the path to justice is rarely straightforward. It demands persistence, courage, and the unwavering belief that truth once unveiled has the power to heal and transform. Through this painful journey, the Wilson family's story transcended personal tragedy. It became a rallying cry for all who seek to hold power accountable and ensure that the promise of protection extends to every citizen without exception. The weight of injustice pressed heavily on James, but his spirit remained unbroken. In the quiet moments between sleepless nights and urgent phone calls, he reflected on the landscape of power and silence that surrounded him. He knew that raw courage alone would not dismantle the walls of deception. What he needed was precision, the sharp edge of intellect combined with unyielding determination. Armed with years of military training and a deep understanding of strategy, James began to piece together the web of influence behind the raid, the hospital's stonewalling, and the efforts to obscure the truth. Whispers from confidential sources, documents obtained through legal channels, and his own instincts pointed toward one person, a high-ranking official quietly orchestrating events from behind the scenes. James prepared for a confrontation unlike any before. This was no longer a battle of force. It was a chess match, a test of will and wit. He arranged a meeting under neutral ground, a small conference room far from prying eyes. The man across the table was calm, exuding the polished confidence of someone accustomed to wielding power without accountability. James's voice was steady, eyes locked on his adversary. "I know what you've done. The raid, the cover-ups, the attempts to silence my family. They all lead back to you." The man's facade flickered momentarily, a shadow crossing his eyes. "You're treading dangerous waters, Mr. Wilson." James leaned in, his tone resolute. "Dangerous for whom? You can hide behind your titles and your silence, but the truth will surface, and when it does, I will be ready." Inside, a fierce dialogue raged, not just between two men, but within James himself. The fear of retaliation warred with the fire of justice. The desire for revenge clashed with the need for strategic patience. He reminded himself every move must be calculated, every word weighed. His goal was not only to confront, but to compel confession, to expose the rotten core beneath the polished surface. The official hesitated, then, perhaps sensing the tide turning, nodded. Slowly. "Very well. Let's talk." James's sharp mind navigated the conversation carefully, peeling back layers of denial and obfuscation. Bit by bit, the truth began to emerge, a tangled web of unethical decisions, abuses of power, and deliberate attempts to suppress dissent. This pivotal moment underscored a profound lesson. Intellect and persistence can unmask even the most entrenched corruption. Strength is essential, but wisdom and patience can be mightier weapons in the fight for justice. For James, this was more than a personal victory. It was a beacon to others caught in the shadows, a reminder that no matter how formidable the opposition, clarity of purpose and unwavering resolve can illuminate the darkest corners. As he left that room, James felt a surge of hope, tempered with caution. The path ahead was still fraught with challenges, but the battle for truth had taken a decisive step forward. His journey was a testament to the power of knowledge. When wielded with courage, it can topple giants and transform lives. As the Wilson family's story unfolded, the raw footage captured by young Alex ignited a digital wildfire. The video showed the harsh reality of Angela's taser attack, the shock, the chaos, the pain all unfolding in real time. It wasn't just a family's private ordeal anymore. It had become a public call to arms. Social media platforms buzzed with activity. Within hours, hashtags like #Justice for Wilson, #Stand with Angela, and #Expose the SWAT. Truth began trending, amplifying voices that demanded accountability and "chon de pos." These simple phrases became rallying cries, uniting people across cities, states, and even countries. What made these hashtags so powerful was their ability to condense complex emotions and demands into shareable, memorable symbols. Every retweet, every share, every comment multiplied the impact, transforming isolated outrage into a collective movement. This digital momentum drew attention far beyond Hillview. News outlets picked up the story, activists organized virtual campaigns, and influencers used their platforms to spotlight the injustice. It was reminiscent of other historic social movements, fueled by social media like Black Lives Matter and Me Too, where ordinary people harnessed technology to challenge systems of power. But this wasn't just about viral videos or trending hashtags. It was about the democratization of storytelling, the ability for anyone with a smartphone to document truth and mobilize support. This shift disrupted traditional narratives controlled by gatekeepers, placing real-time evidence into the hands of millions. James watched these developments with cautious optimism. He knew the power of social media was double-edged. It could spread misinformation just as easily as truth. But in this case, it was a lifeline, a tool to counter silence and denial. The Wilson family's story became a case study in how transparency and collective voice can force institutions to reckon with uncomfortable realities. Officials and law enforcement felt the pressure mounting as public scrutiny intensified. Some issued statements promising investigations, while others grew defensive, revealing cracks in their narratives. Yet the true power lay in the people, the countless individuals who refused to look away, who amplified the message, and who stood in solidarity. Their collective energy turned digital awareness into tangible action protests, fundraisers, and legal support. This wave of activism taught a crucial lesson in today's interconnected world. Social media is not just a platform for entertainment. It is an indispensable weapon in the fight for justice. It empowers the marginalized, challenges complacency, and demands accountability from those in power. For James and his family, this digital chorus of support was more than encouraging words. It was a shield against isolation, a beacon of hope that their struggle would not be forgotten or silenced. As the hashtags continued to trend, echoing across timelines and headlines, they carried a message clear and undeniable. The fight for justice is a shared responsibility, and together voices can break through the walls of oppression. The relentless buzz of social media, the mounting public outcry, and the undeniable video evidence eventually forced the wheels of justice to move. The story of Angela Wilson's brutal taser attack, once a private nightmare, had evolved into a high-profile case that demanded attention from the highest levels of law enforcement and government. Behind closed doors, the FBI opened an official investigation marking a pivotal shift in the battle for truth and accountability. The FBI agents, seasoned professionals, trained to handle sensitive and complex cases, stepped carefully through layers of local police files, witness testimonies, and the mounting digital evidence that the Wilson family and their community had so courageously compiled. James watched this development with cautious hope. The path ahead was far from easy, but the involvement of the federal authorities signaled that this was no longer a case that could be swept under the rug. At the same time, James engaged Susan Parker, a tenacious civil rights attorney, known for her fearless advocacy and sharp legal acumen. Susan's arrival brought a new wave of confidence. She was not only skilled in the courtroom, but also deeply connected with political allies who understood the broader implications of this case. In a tense meeting with local politicians, Susan laid out the facts and the stakes. This is about more than one family, she declared. It's about restoring faith in our institutions and protecting the rights of every citizen. We need full transparency, accountability, and systemic change. Pressure mounted on local officials as the investigation intensified. The mayor's office found itself under scrutiny, facing questions from the media and constituents demanding answers. The police department was urged to cooperate fully with federal investigators, with some officers feeling the weight of the public eye for the first time. Inside the FBI task force, investigators coordinated efforts to gather incontrovertible evidence, body camera footage, internal communications, and forensic analyses. Their goal was not just to prosecute, but to uncover any systemic failures that allowed such abuses to occur. Throughout this period, James and Angela remained steadfast. Susan's legal guidance was crucial, helping them navigate the complexities of the justice system, while offering a shield against intimidation tactics. Together, they prepared for every hearing, every interview, every challenge that came their way. This chapter of their journey underscored a vital lesson. The legal system, with all its flaws and obstacles, can become a powerful ally when harnessed correctly. It offers a structured path toward justice, ensuring that voices drowned out by fear and oppression can be heard loud and clear. Yet it also highlighted the necessity of vigilance and advocacy without active participation. Even the most robust systems risk falling prey to complacency and corruption. For the Wilson family, this legal intervention was both a beacon of hope and a call to remain unwavering. The battle for justice was not just fought in courtrooms and investigations, but in the hearts and minds of everyone watching, waiting, and demanding change. As the investigation deepened, the message was unmistakable. When courage meets the law and the community stands united, even the most entrenched systems can be challenged and transformed. The streets of Hillview, once quiet and unassuming, transformed into a vibrant chorus of voices united by a shared purpose. The news of Angela Wilson's ordeal, amplified by the relentless efforts of her family and supporters, had galvanized the community into action. Peaceful protests, town hall meetings, and community forums became daily occurrences, each event pulsating with a sense of urgency and hope. It began with small gatherings in the neighborhood park, where friends, neighbors, and local activists stood shoulder to shoulder holding signs emblazoned with slogans like "Justice for Wilson," "End police brutality," and "Protect our rights." Mothers with children, veterans with weary eyes, and young students with determined spirits all contributed their voices to the cause. One evening, under the soft glow of streetlights, James found himself among the crowd. Faces familiar and new surrounded him. Their expressions a blend of sorrow, resolve, and solidarity. A young woman approached him, tears in her eyes. "Your family's courage has inspired us all. We're here to stand with you." James nodded, overwhelmed, but grateful. The unity was palpable, a fortress of human spirit that no act of violence could dismantle. The community organized fundraising events to support Angela's medical bills and the legal fees that loomed large. Local businesses donated supplies and services, while artists created murals honoring Angela's resilience and the fight for justice. These acts of kindness transformed pain into purpose. Town hall meetings were particularly poignant. Residents voiced their fears, shared their experiences with law enforcement, and demanded accountability. Elected officials were pressed to commit to reforms. Improved police training, transparent investigation procedures, and community oversight committees. At one meeting, a city council member addressed the crowd. "Your voices matter. Change begins with us together." The Wilson family also found unexpected allies among former law enforcement officers who acknowledged the systemic issues and advocated for change from within. Social media groups blossomed, creating spaces for dialogue, education, and mobilization. These digital communities bridged gaps, connecting Hillview's residents with activists and experts nationwide. This groundswell of support was a powerful testament to a fundamental truth. When individuals unite, their collective strength can reshape institutions and rewrite narratives. For James and Angela, the embrace of their community was both healing and empowering. It reinforced the belief that their struggle was not isolated. It was part of a larger movement toward justice and equity. Their story became a beacon, illuminating the path for others facing similar battles, showing that even in the darkest moments, solidarity and collective action kindle the brightest hope. The community's response taught a profound lesson. Change is not just a matter of policy, but of people coming together, raising their voices, extending their hands, and refusing to accept injustice as inevitable. In Hillview, a new chapter had begun, one where courage met community, and together they forged a future where no family would face oppression alone. In the heart of the unfolding saga, ordinary heroes emerged individuals whose courage and presence of mind became pivotal in shining a light on injustice. Among them was Alex, the teenage neighbor, whose quick thinking and determination had captured the harrowing events on his phone. There was also Mrs. Wilson, the elderly woman across the street, who had witnessed the commotion and later shared her observations with unwavering honesty. Together with several other neighbors, these everyday witnesses formed a tapestry of truth that bolstered the Wilson family's fight. Alex, a quiet and introspective boy, never imagined his actions would ripple so far beyond his small neighborhood. His hands trembled as he pressed record, driven by a simple instinct to document what was happening. That video became the catalyst that transformed a private ordeal into a public reckoning. Watching the footage play back in the safety of his room, Alex felt a mix of fear and responsibility. "I couldn't just stand by," he said later in an interview, his voice steady despite his youth. People needed to see the truth. Mrs. Wilson in her 70s had lived in the neighborhood for decades. When she saw the commotion, her heart raced with concern, but her resolve was clear. "I've seen too much injustice in my time to stay silent now," she said. Her detailed accounts and willingness to speak out added depth and credibility to the narrative. Her presence at community meetings and support rallies was a testament to her belief in justice. Other neighbors came forward as well, sharing their experiences and affirming the Wilsons' version of events. These testimonies created a chorus of voices that could not be ignored, reinforcing the notion that this was not an isolated incident, but a symptom of a deeper problem. The role of these witnesses extended beyond mere observation. They became active participants in the quest for accountability, attending court hearings, testifying when called upon, and using social media platforms to spread awareness. Their bravery was a powerful reminder this is not the sole domain of lawyers, officials, or activists. It belongs to every person willing to stand up and bear witness. Through their stories, the community learned a vital lesson. Each individual holds the potential to be a guardian of truth, a defender of fairness. In an age where technology places the power of recording and sharing in everyone's hands, the opportunity and responsibility to document injustice has never been greater. Alex's video, Mrs. Wilson's testimony, and the collective courage of the neighbors exemplified how ordinary people, by simply refusing to look away, can become extraordinary forces for change. Their contributions underscored a profound truth. When silence is broken, when witnesses speak out, the foundations of injustice begin to crumble. In the Wilson family's fight, the voices of these witnesses were not just supportive, they were indispensable. They transformed pain into power, fear into fortitude, and invisibility into undeniable presence. Angela's path to recovery was neither swift nor straightforward. The physical scars, though visible, were just the surface of a deeper struggle, one that wove through the fabric of her mind and spirit. The taser attack left wounds that medicine alone could not heal. In the quiet mornings that followed the storm, Angela faced each day with a mix of determination and vulnerability. Simple tasks: getting out of bed, walking without pain, even speaking without trembling, became battles won with grit and grace. The bruises faded slowly, but the echoes of trauma lingered in her every step. Her journey was supported by a dedicated team of therapists experts in trauma recovery who understood the delicate interplay between body and mind. With gentle patience, they guided Angela through sessions of physical rehabilitation, helping her regain strength and mobility. Yet it was the psychological therapy that proved transformative. In these sessions, Angela confronted the shadows that the attack cast over her psyche. Fear, anxiety, flashbacks that jolted her awake in the dead of night. Slowly, with skilled guidance, she learned to reclaim her sense of safety and control. James stood unwaveringly by her side. His presence was a pillar of comfort and strength, a reminder that she was not alone. Their conversations, sometimes raw and unfiltered, became lifelines. "We'll get through this," James would whisper during the darkest moments, their hands tightly clasped. Family and friends formed a circle of support, providing not just physical assistance, but emotional sustenance. Each encouraging word, every shared silence, wove a safety net beneath Angela's fragile steps. The community rallied as well, offering rides to therapy appointments, preparing meals, and simply being there to listen. Their collective empathy became a balm, softening the edges of Angela's pain. Her healing process highlighted a critical truth often overlooked in stories of violence. Recovery is holistic. It demands care for both the visible injuries and the invisible wounds. Physical therapy can mend the body, but without mental health support, the soul remains fractured. Angela's story became a powerful testament to the necessity of accessible and compassionate healthcare services for trauma survivors. It underscored the importance of recognizing psychological scars as real and worthy of attention. In time, Angela reclaimed parts of herself thought lost. The smiles returned tentative at first, but growing in confidence. The nightmares lessened. The laughter of her children, once a painful reminder, became a source of joy and renewal. Her resilience inspired those around her, transforming her from victim to survivor, a symbol of hope in a narrative too often defined by despair. This chapter of her journey teaches us that healing is a process, sometimes slow, often challenging, but always possible with the right support. It reminds us to extend compassion not only to those injured, but also to those navigating the complex terrain of recovery. Angela's courage shines as a beacon illuminating the path for others facing similar trials. Her story is a call to action for communities to prioritize mental health and holistic care, ensuring that no survivor faces their pain in silence or isolation. Through her recovery, Angela embodies a timeless lesson. True healing encompasses mind, body, and spirit, nurtured by love, patience, and unwavering support. The Wilson family's ordeal was not just a personal tragedy. It was a stark illumination of the systemic failures embedded deep within law enforcement and the legal system. As public scrutiny intensified and the legal battles progressed, it became clear that the issues extended far beyond one incident. They pointed to profound flaws in how police are trained, how laws are enforced, and how accountability is maintained, or more often evaded. At the heart of the problem lay the training of police officers. In many departments across the country, recruits undergo rigorous physical and tactical preparation, but receive insufficient education on de-escalation cultural competency and the psychological dynamics of encounters with civilians. This imbalance fosters an environment where force becomes the default response, rather than a last resort. James's case highlighted the catastrophic consequences when this imbalance goes unaddressed. The aggressive tactics used against Angela, including the premature deployment of a taser, stemmed from a mindset that prioritizes control over communication, domination over dialogue. The aftermath showed how ill-prepared officers can escalate situations, igniting fear and violence rather than diffusing it. Legal frameworks also came under scrutiny. Existing laws designed to protect citizens from police misconduct often fall short in practice. Immunity provisions shield officers from prosecution. Internal review boards lack independence, and complaints are frequently dismissed without thorough investigation. This creates a culture of impunity where misconduct is neither adequately deterred nor punished. The Wilson family's fight became a powerful case study for why comprehensive reform is necessary. Activists, legal experts, and policymakers pointed to several key areas for change. First, police training must evolve to emphasize empathy communication and community engagement. Officers should be equipped to recognize the nuances of mental health crises, cultural differences, and implicit biases. Simulation-based training focused on de-escalation could prepare officers to handle volatile situations calmly and safely. Second, accountability mechanisms must be strengthened. Independent oversight bodies with real authority to investigate and discipline misconduct are essential. Transparency should be the norm, with body camera footage and complaint records accessible to the public to build trust. Third, laws that protect citizens' rights during encounters with law enforcement need reinforcement. Revisiting qualified immunity-enhancing civilian review boards and setting clear standards for use of force can close loopholes that have long enabled abuse. James and Susan, the family's attorney, became vocal advocates for these reforms. They engaged in community forums, testified before legislative committees, and collaborated with reform-minded officials. Their personal story added weight to broader calls for change, illustrating the human cost behind statistics and policies. Their efforts underscored a vital lesson. Piecemeal adjustments are insufficient. True change requires a fundamental overhaul of the systems that govern policing and justice. Without this, incidents like Angela's taser attack will continue perpetuating cycles of mistrust and harm. This chapter in their journey serves as a clarion call for society to rethink, rebuild, and recommit to the principles of justice and equality. It highlights the urgency of listening to those most affected, learning from their experiences, and designing systems that protect rather than punish. The Wilson family's story reminds us that justice is not a given. It is a responsibility shared by all. It demands courage to confront uncomfortable truths, persistence to challenge entrenched interests, and vision to create a future where power is exercised with fairness and humanity. Their struggle illuminates the path forward, a path marked by education, transparency, and accountability. It calls on communities, lawmakers, and law enforcement agencies to work together to dismantle the foundations of abuse and build institutions worthy of the public's trust. In the end, the journey toward reform is ongoing. But through voices like James's and Angela's, through the solidarity of their community, and through the lessons hard-earned from their experience, there is hope that meaningful change is not just possible, but inevitable. The auditorium was filled to capacity, the air thick with anticipation and a quiet reverence. Families, activists, neighbors, and strangers all gathered to hear a story that had transcended personal tragedy to become a beacon of hope and a call for change. On the stage stood James Wilson, his posture, steady eyes, reflecting both the weight of the past and the determination for the future. Taking a deep breath, James began to speak, his voice calm, yet resonant, cutting through the silence like a clarion call. "Our story is not just about us," he said. "It's about every family that has felt the sting of injustice, every community that has watched as those meant to protect, instead, cause harm." He spoke of Angela's courage, the community's strength, and the relentless pursuit of truth that had carried them through the darkest days. He shared moments of despair and triumph, the nights filled with fear, and the mornings renewed with hope. Each word was laced with authenticity, stirring the hearts of those listening. Angela joined him, her presence a testament to resilience. "Healing isn't just about recovering," she said softly. "It's about reclaiming our dignity, our voices, and our power." Together, they emphasized the profound truth that silence in the face of injustice is complicity. "When we stay silent," James declared, "we become part of the problem. But when we speak up, when we stand together, we become the change." The crowd listened intently as James outlined a vision for a society where accountability is not optional, where equality is a reality, and where every voice matters. He urged everyone to take up the mantle of advocacy, to support those whose stories remain unheard, and to challenge systems that perpetuate inequality. "Your voice is your power," Angela reminded them. "Use it. Stand up for justice no matter how daunting the fight may seem. Because justice, true justice, only arrives when we refuse to be silent." The final words echoed through the hall. Powerful and unyielding silence is complicity. Justice comes when we speak out. As the applause surged, it was clear that their message had ignited a fire, a resolve to continue the fight, to hold on to hope, and to build a future where no one is forced to endure what the Wilson family faced alone. This closing chapter was more than an end. It was a beginning. A rallying cry for individuals everywhere to embrace their roles as guardians of justice, to raise their voices against oppression, and to believe in the transformative power of collective action. In their story, we find a mirror reflecting our shared responsibility, a reminder that every one of us holds the key to change, and that by speaking out, we light the way toward a more just and compassionate world. If you've been moved by James and Angela's story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because stories like these deserve to be heard. Silence isn't just dangerous, it's deadly. And remember, this injustice thrives when good people do nothing. Will you be the voice that breaks the silence, or will you let history repeat itself? The choice is yours.